I'm Pam Hayes from Hayes Sewing Machine Company of Wilmington, Delaware, and welcome to a live question and answer for stabilizers. We've had a lot of requests for this, so they're always coming out with new stabilizers and things like that, but what the information I'm going to give you today, I think is going to help you out just if you need some basic help with doing stabilizers. Now, when you're working with stabilizers, they fall into three categories. And by the way, this is a question and answer, so you do need to be logged on for YouTube Live. But if you have a question, type it in and we'll see what we can do to help you out. With stabilizers, they fall into three categories: tearaway, cutaway, and then just unique and unusual is a good category for the rest. Tearaway, you want to work with things that you are going to be like a non-woven. So think of a quilt block, think of a lot of times a tote bag, something like that. Something that doesn't stretch. Traditionally, that's what I would use the tearaway for. Cutaway, something that has a high density for stitch count, or something that stretches. So think of a knit shirt. Think of things like that. So something that you also want to leave in your project so that if you, especially for clothing, it's going to get washed a lot and you want to have it in there and it'll do a nice job for you. So again, and then the unusual ones would be ones that you heat away, or ones that will stick and then be able to wash away. They also have ones that I would use as a topper, and a topper would be something that would have texture to it. So think polar fleece, think towel, anything like that that has a texture to it. You're going to want to have a topper to it so you're not going to have any issue with the stitches kind of poking up through your design. Now, a couple of things to be aware of. There are sometimes when you don't need stabilizer. For instance, if you are a quilter and you want to do a quilting project. This quilting project I did here is a table runner. And the embroidery I did for the borders and then also the center section, but no stabilizer at all was needed for that. So when you're working with it, because the batting inside is enough of a stabilizer. You'll notice it was a simple outline quilting design that I did, so you don't have to worry about high stitch count, high density to it. And again, the batting was sufficient and all I needed to do was hoop everything at one time. Okay? Now, before we get into the stabilizers, one of the things that we've been noticing lately in the store, people have been trying to cheat a little bit. And I understand stabilizers are an added cost to it, but you'll try to sew and do a test sample. And then you'll come into the store, you'll drop us a line and you're saying, the machine is really stitching poorly. And I'll ask, is your stabilizer in all the way in your hoop? And there's always a pause and you're like, well, it's mostly in the hoop. Well, mostly in the hoop just doesn't really count. If you are doing a traditional, embroidery, you do need to have your fabric in the hoop. This is a worst case scenario, and I have actually seen this. This is cute, okay? You shouldn't be able to see air at all. If you see air, and then look how it's just flopping around, it's just moving around, you'll never get a good stitch out, no matter how well your machine is calibrated. This is a do not do. This is that's a bad example. So when you're working with your stabilizer, itself must be at least all the way in the hoop. You notice how there's no cheating. I have everything entirely in the hoop. Okay. Now this guy is set up to do what we call floating, a technique that you don't actually put the fabric in the hoop, because sometimes you can't either say it's a cardigan that you want to do an embroidery down the side and you have buttons involved and you really need to be along the edge. Sometimes you just can't hoop it, or say you are worried about the hoop burn for that. Then if that was the case, I would put whatever stabilizer was appropriate, and unless it's a sticky stabilizer, you don't have to do this next step. I use 505 temporary spray adhesive. So what's going to happen is I would take and I spray just a couple shots, and then I would put my fabric in the hoop, and let me just do it on the table here, then I'll show you. And then see, it's good. Now you can reposition it quite often. Okay, so if you need to, that's fine. So when you're working with this guy, just be aware that you can reposition it. And a lot of times what I would also do on this is, if my machine has a basting option, that's awesome as well, because then it'll do a straight stitch to hold everything down for you. Now, if you think spray adhesive isn't going to be enough to hold your fabric positioned nicely, then we have a stabilizer that is a sticky. And the one that I am using today is done by the Sulky company. And, sorry, I'll get the name for you. It is Sticky Fabrisolvi. So this would be it. Hopefully you can see that. Sticky Fabrisolvi. How that works is it'll wash away when you're done, which is awesome. And you're going to have a paper on one side. So I'm just going to separate this so you can see it. Okay, so it's sticky. Okay, you'll see how it looks like fabric, but it's not. And then this is the paper. Okay, so it's 2 bits. So when you hoop this, you're going to take and you're going to grab something sharp, pen, not a pen, I'm sorry, something like a little pair of scissors, pin would work great. You put the paper side up in your hoop. So the paper side is up, and then I just score it. And again, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do this all on the inside of my hoop, and then you peel it away. Sorry, it just doesn't normally take this long. There you go. So when you're working with it, you see that you can peel it away. All right, and you would then peel all of the entirety of it, and then it's like flypaper, and it'll just stick to it. So the Fabrisolvi is going to be an awesome one to work with, especially if you had something that is going to move. This is what I used when I did my towel. So on the back side of my towel, you'll notice how it looks nice. But what I did is I just plopped it down, and then it held it for me. Now, anytime you're using a pressure sensitive stabilizer, remove it pretty quick. Okay, so don't leave it for a long period of time. I did, when it first came out, I left it in there. I'm like, well, let me see. I still have a little bit of that in there today because it was one that didn't wash away like this one does. This is the sticky Faber-Solvi. So this one would wash away, but the other one that I was working with was sticky, plain sticky, and it didn't have any wash away capabilities, and I left it too long. So try to get it off within an hour. That way you're going to find it'll do a much better job for you. So again, things for hooping. You must have your stabilizer in the hoop. Traditionally, I will put my fabric in with that. And anytime I'm putting my fabric in, make sure I tend to spray adhesive them together. Or again, if you're using a sticky, you're good to go. When you're working with stabilizers in general, you have different sizes of the stabilizers and different quantities that you can get them. You can get a packaged bit. This is Sulky Stiffy. Okay, so this is a package, and then this is a 1 yard package. You can also get them on a roll, and what's nice is it just kind of feeds out from here, so it keeps it all organized for you, and remember what it was. Ever have that? You go into your stabilizer and it's all non-labeled, and you're like, I can't remember exactly what that was. So it's kind of nice if you can keep the package, and then you can get them really big, so really long. So the people that have the larger embroidery fields, be aware you can get stabilizers that will work that way, or you can get stabilizers by the yard. So they're all options for you. Now we're going to talk about, again, the stabilizers themselves. So I'm going to primarily be working with the sulky stabilizers. However, be aware that you can do, again, most companies have a type of stabilizer that you can work with. And in the ones that are tearaway, the one done by the Pellon company is great. This one is been around for a time. This is called Pellon Stitch and Tear, and it's number 806 for the Pellon company. Look at that. It's a clean rip. It's kind of heavy. So if I was working with a design that took 20 minutes to sew out, this would be great. So you do your design, you rip it away when you're done. And especially if you're working with a design that is fairly dense, kind of in one area, it'll work really nicely for you. Again, heavier stabilizer. They also have one, which is the opposite extreme. It's called Tear Easy. And just like the name says, it's going to tear easy. You can feel it's much lighter weight, and again, it'll rip easily for you. Now, I would use this if I was simply doing a outline quilting design through a cotton layer of material. So like what we started out with, this guy here, where we just had our outline design. Again, took about 6 minutes to stitch, so it was no big deal. You want something fairly lightweight. So remember, if you're using an outline quilting design as something decorative for your block, but not through the batting, you need something fairly lightweight so it'll pull out easily without destroying the stitches. So Tear Easy is a nice option to work with. Now, the next one down is Totally Stable. Totally Stable is about twice the thickness of Tear Easy, and what's cool with it, it has a kind of a glossy feel on one side, and that will allow you to iron it to your project. So this particular one here, you can iron it. You don't have to do any spray adhesive. It's not really sticky in any way. And what's nice is if you iron it incorrectly, so in other words, if you iron it with it up towards the iron, it just peels away from the iron, leaving no residue. So this one will do a very nice job for you. All right, so Sticky Plus. Okay, so this is the regular sticky. Again, you're going to see that it has the paper to it, just like I was showing you before. Then your stabilizer, the sticky part, is on the other side. But remember, this doesn't wash out. So I have found better success with this on canvas bags, just regular shirts. If you want, again, to hold it, do your design. But remember, you got to remove it fairly quickly. I wouldn't leave it beyond an hour being stuck to the project. Okay? So that's Sticky Plus. And then the one I was showing you is the Sticky Faber-Solvy. So it is like the Sticky Plus, but you can wash it away. You just soak it and then it'll be gone. When I was doing my towel, I soaked it for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. And I just wanted to make sure that everything was gone, and it was great. That does a nice job. Now, cutaways. Next category. So remember, something that has a high stitch count, or something that is going to be in a knit material situation. So again, on my t-shirts, on my baby's onesies, this is what I would tend to work with. Now, the first one we have is Cutaway Plus. Just trying to do it so you can see it. Cutaway Plus. Cutaway Plus feels almost like a fabric. It is a real, and you'll notice this, I can't tear. Okay, it's done in such a way that you can't rip it apart. You actually need to cut it. If I was going to cut something after this is all done, what I basically do is I cut around the perimeter of my embroidery and I leave about 1/8 of an inch. And if it's something that I'm worried that I can see through, consider pinking the edge, because then you don't have like a line of demarcation to it, and we'll do a nicer job. This is also a nice one to work with if I'm doing work with a heavier design. So, you know, the bigger the embroidery fields get on machines, the longer it takes to sew some of these designs out. I called up one the other day, and you know, it took me a minute to translate. It said 120 minutes. I'm like, 120 minutes? That seems a long time. I'm like, that's 2 hours. So, needless to say, Cutaway Plus was my first choice. Okay? So with this guy here, it'll just make it so that nothing shifts on you that you don't want.
How many layers would you do?
If I was doing work with the Cutaway Plus on a heavier design, probably at least 2. Okay. Now, soft and sheer, again, other extreme. This is a cutaway as well, but soft and sheer is what I would do baby's onesie. Okay. I was also looking in, Patricia had a tote bag that had large lettering on it. And again, needed to have something that would support it and stay in there. So this would do a nice job. This is also kind of nice in the fact that you can layer it. So for instance, if you instinctively thought, one layer is just not going to be enough, double it up and spray adhesive them together and use both. Think of golf shirts. Think of, I'm putting a name on a shirt for somebody. And also if people say, this itches a lot, I don't like this because it itches. Soft and sheer is awesome. That's why I tend to use it again in the baby's onesies. It does a nice job for you. And again, you're going to cut away whatever is left over excess. You don't want to have a whole bunch, you know, left over in there. So again, about 1/8 of an inch. Now, if you're working with something that tends to, no matter what you do, you know, you thought you've used the right stabilizer and somebody puts this article of clothing on and they're like, it still itches. And they're kind of looking at you like, fix it. And this is a wonderful way to fix it. This is Tender Touch. Tender Touch is a really lightweight interfacing. So after you've done your project, and I am known for, I've worn this shirt 50 times, and the 51st time it is driving me crazy. It seems to be itching. You put this on the back, and away you go. So technically it's not a stabilizer because you don't use this when you're doing your embroidery itself in the machine. It's an after the fact, you rub your hand down it and you're like, that person's gonna think that that's a little too scratchy. This is what you're gonna use behind. So it just makes life a little bit easier. Again, I would pink the edge. It's a fusible, so you're good.
What stabilizer would you recommend for a quilt label?
Depends on the size of the quilt label. The question was what stabilizer. If I was doing something that was just lettering, and it was fairly small, like a 5x7, it was going to take about 10 minutes to stitch out. If you don't mind pulling some of the stabilizer away, I would tend to use 2 layers of a Tear Easy. If you wanted to have it in the back of the label permanently, like you wanted to have it as a reinforcement, then consider using a Cutaway, like a soft and shear. That would do a very nice job for you. Okay? Now, if I'm working with wash away, this is the weird and unusual category. They have a couple different solvies. They first started out with the traditional solvy. Okay? So the traditional solvy, you see how it looks very film-like. And with this is what I would use as that topper I was talking about. So my towel. When I was hooping my towel, remember I had the sticky Faber-Solvy to hold it to my hoop. But this has a nice nap to it, so you want to make sure that the nubbles kind of stay down when you're doing your embroidery. So with this guy here, I put a layer of solvy on the top. I did not spray adhesive this, but the machine I was using, which was a Solaris, has a basting option. So I clicked on the basting option. It did a straight stitch to hold everything together. And then what's nice is this guy it'll tear away, and then whatever's left over, it'll just wash out. So you're good to go. So that's the solvy. Then they have a next layer, and this one is called Super Solvy. So it's basically twice the thickness of the traditional solvy. And again, you'll see that it has a little bit more density to it, a little tougher to see through. And this, again, anything that has, like if you're doing a Turkish towel, anything that has like corduroy, velvets, something like that that you can rip away, you're good. But remember, you always want to make sure that whenever you're using a solvy as a topper, these are wash away. So if you can get your particular fabric wet, these are great. Now, because we're talking about toppers for a second, if you find you can't get your fabric wet, it's just not going to, like say you're doing a silk or a home deck material that requires dry cleaning only, that type of thing. They have one that is called Heat Away Clear Film. So Heat Away Clear Film is awesome in the fact that you basically you can tear it away, so it will pull, but anything that's left over, you just put an iron over top of it, not touching the material, but just put it over top, and it'll just kind of shrivel up and you just brush it away. So it's really nice. It does a nice job. So again, if you're working with those fabrics that you can't wash and it has to be a dry clean only situation, it does a great job. Now the next two are back to the water soluble. This one is Ultra Solvy. So Ultra Solvy is really nice if I was doing lace designs. Think of 3D lace, bookmarks, ornaments, things like that. You're going to find that this will do a nice job. What's nice with this is if you're doing any of those type of things, remember you have your pretty thread top and bottom. So you have rewound the nice thread top and bottom. You put this alone in the hoop, and then you just do your lace design or whatever you're going to be doing, and then this washes out when you're done. Now, the only thing I'll say for doing lace designs and doing things like that, make sure the designer of the embroidery wants it to be a freestanding lace design, because freestanding is the really important words in that sentence. A lot of times they'll label it FSL on websites, okay? Freestanding lace. If it just says lace, I wouldn't assume that it's designed to be 3D. A lot of times doing freestanding lace, it's heavily embroidered. They have sewn, they're going to design it so you can sew around the edges several times. That's going to be built into the program. So freestanding lace is way different than just regular lace. So don't assume with regular lace that what happens is if you do regular lace, you soak it, you may just have a wad of thread in your hand when you're done. Freestanding lace has the grid work in the back, and it's designed to be freestanding when it's done. Now, this came out first, the Ultra Solvy, and then they were noticing that sometimes when you do multiple layers of Ultra Solvy, it tends to pull apart on itself because of the way it's made. The needle can cut it several times. So they came out with Fabra Solvy. So it looks like fabric, okay, has that look to it. And what's cool with this guy is I would do, if I was doing an ornament, a book marker, that type of thing, I'd probably do 2 or 3 layers of this. And what I would do is, if I was doing multiples, I would cram them all together in my hoop and do them all at kind of one time. And what's nice with this is, again, you soak it and it's gone. If I'm doing a lace or bookmark, be aware Fabra Solvy, it's not just a dip thing to make it go away, it's a let it soak. And I would say you might be leaving it soak for about 5 hours. That's not uncommon. It depends on how stiff you want your basic, your design to be at the end. So if I'm doing a bookmark where I want it to be fairly stiff, then I may be soaking it for just 2 hours. If I was doing something that I'm going to use as an applique on a sweater, and I want it to have kind of a 3D look, and I want it to be flexible and soft, you may be soaking it 8 hours. How you would know is you take it out at the 3-hour mark, you pat it dry, you let it sit there for a second. It's going to dry fairly quickly. Is it too stiff? If it's too stiff, put it back in the water. If it's fine, you're good to go. Okay? So I think we're pretty much done. So are there any questions? All right. Hopefully this helps you out. Again, remember, they're always coming out with new stabilizers, and you'll say sometimes, well, I like to use this stabilizer. The name of the game, whatever works for you. We just try to kind of give you an idea. And I've also made a handout that is going to talk about embroidery basics, and it's up at the top. It talks about the different types of stabilizers. And you'll also notice that if you're doing decorative stitches on your machine or embroidery on your machine, and there are little checklists to have. And you'll find on one of them for the make sure you use stabilizer on your project for the embroidery on your machine, and you'll see it says completely in hoop, no cheating. So remember, your stabilizer has to be all the way around the edges. And in the store, the stabilizers are going to be 20% off until August the 5th. And we'll see you next time. And Loretta's going to be doing a mystery quilt. Have a great day.